Welcome back to episode 5 of Did You Know? We are diving right in to spend some time around our operational budget. You heard us talk a little bit about that in episode 4 around teachers and teacher salary, but we're going to spend some time in episode 5 talking about our tax rate and how that impacts not only our operational budget, but it also impacts the INS side of our house, the gray bucket. If you've tuned in, that will be a familiar term to you. So here we are, we're going to jump in. I love this picture, this cartoon, because it really illustrates what I feel like sometimes when it's time to develop a budget for a district. When I think about baking a cake, I would go to the grocery store, I'd grab my cart, and I would pull some flour off of one aisle, and I would pull some sugar and some vanilla, and then I'm going to go down the aisle to buy the pan and all of these things. So I keep taking all of the items into my cart to bake a cake. And they all come from different aisles so that when I get home at the end of the day, I have all of the necessary materials to be able to bake a cake. That's exactly what happens in school funding. We don't get all of our money from one source. In fact, it takes multiple sources, a little bit of this and a little bit of that, to put together that $67 million budget that you heard me talk about in episode 4. We have the local revenue, that portion, that aisle, if you will. That includes the tax dollars that our community members pay towards school. It takes a little bit of that. We have money from local partnerships. You've heard me talk about the Heartland Education Foundation and how amazing they have been to provide money. We have our Crandall ISD Education Foundation and how amazing they support our classroom initiatives and the really innovative things that are happening and their dedication and hours that they pour in as well. And so we're very grateful for them. We have PTOs, we have booster clubs. So we have all of those local sources. We pile a little bit of that into our buggy. And then we move over to the state funding, which is a super complicated formula. The way that local and state funding work is that if you get more local funding, if you get more things in your basket from the local aisle, you get less from the state aisle. But there is a contribution from the state in the forms of just the basic allotment, but we also have some special grant funds and things like that. You heard us talk in episode 3, I believe, around the technology and the security grants that we have. That comes from the state source. And then we have federal revenue, which is things like our Title I program that serves our economically disadvantaged families. We have Title II, Title III, Title IV that each have their own specific service. We have our food and nutrition program, school lunch program that comes there. So at the end of the day, you take all of this money and you pile it all into your basket with a little bit of this and a little bit of that. You pull up to the cashier and are able to then put together the $67 million budget for Crandall ISD. So let's talk a little bit about those gray and yellow buckets again. Let me just kind of remind you in case you missed episode 3. I'm trying to give you an analogy that will help you relate a little bit. The yellow bucket is our maintenance and operations budget. If you're thinking about your house, this is the money that you spend on a day-to-day basis. What do you spend for insurance? What do you spend for food, your gas, your utilities, your living resources? And for us, that's what we call the maintenance and operations side. In Crandall, about 82% of that is salaries. The other 18% we spend on the insurance and the gas for our buses and the paper for our classrooms and the books and those kinds of things. So that comes out of the yellow bucket. And then we have the gray bucket, which is our INS. And again, that analogy to go back to your house is like your mortgage payment. And so I can't take any of the money that is spent paying off our debt in the INS bucket. I can't take that money to increase teacher salaries. And I can't take any of money away from teacher salaries to be able to buy new buildings or pay back additional debt. Those two buckets operate completely independently, like two different accounts, and so can't mix those up. In episode 3, you heard me talk a little bit, those are taxed at a different rate. So I want to just take a few minutes to talk about the tax rate aligned to these two buckets. So the next slide that you're going to see is our tax rate in these same colors. So the gray illustrates the interest and sinking rate, and the yellow illustrates the maintenance and operations rate. Those match those gray and yellow buckets that we've talked about on the previous slide. So when we're talking about the interest and sinking, remember this is the amount of money or the amount of tax that we levy that allows us to pay back debt. So when you look at 2015, 2016, you see that we were levying a tax of about 48 cents for every $100. In 2016, 2017, we stayed at 48 cents. And then, if you'll remember from our previous slides, in 2017, 2018, we passed a new bond, and that then allowed us to levy a tax of 50 cents per every $100 of your tax evaluation.
And that has been our rate, and we are maxed out at the rate that the state allows. We cannot raise that tax rate. We could lower it. Yes, we could lower it, but we cannot raise it. And so in the future years, if we were to ask for an additional bond or go out for a bond with our voters, what we would really essentially be asking for is permission to extend our line of credit. There'll be no impact to our voters because we are already at the maximum amount of tax that we can charge on our interest and sinking side.
So in episode 3, you heard me talk about in 2022, we passed a $365 million bond, and it wasn't like somebody just showed up at the door and gave me a check for $365 million. We had to wait until we could afford the payments on chunks of money. And so we showed you how we have taken out smaller portions of loans or sold bonds. That's what we call it in school world. We sell bonds. We've sold those off in smaller chunks or series so that we could afford the payment. We are maxed out at 50 cents. You also have heard me talk a little about the future of probably needing to call another bond election in our district to build another elementary school and to build another middle school. When we do that, I won't be able to raise taxes because we are already at the ceiling. All we will be asking our voters to approve is to extend our line of debt so that we can then begin to find when we can afford to make the payments, sell the bonds, and then build those projects. So that's the gray bucket. But what we do have some flexibility a lot for is what's happening in our maintenance and operations budget. And that's illustrated on this slide through the yellow bucket or through the yellow bar. You'll see that in 2018-19, we paid $1.04 for every $100 in taxes levied. Over time, since 2018, we have lowered that amount, and now we are paying about 67 cents. It's really 66.92. We pay that in every $100 worth of property value. So as you can see, we have lowered our total operating tax. One of the questions that I always get is, if you knew you needed the money, Dr. Murry, why did you keep lowering taxes? Well, this was not something that Crandall ISD was alone in. This was a statewide effort. Our tax rate is largely governed by what happens in our legislature. And when our state legislatures have done things like increase the homestead exemption or compress tax rates, this is the result for schools, that we are able to charge less. And so what has happened in Crandall is that as we have lowered taxes by 37 cents over the last few years, we have been asking voters back in November to raise that by 12 cents. We called that a VATER, a voter-approved tax ratification election. Districts all around us have already done that. They've already approved the tax ratification election in their district. In fact, this map shows you Region 10. The state of Texas is divided into 20 regions. Schools find themselves, and so there's nothing magical about the number, but we find ourselves in Region 10. That's the Dallas area. And what you see here on this map is every school district that is in a blue dot has already passed their voter-approved tax ratification election. They've already approved their VATER. So they have already increased their maintenance and operations side of the house. They're already increasing their taxes to put more money into their yellow bucket. Those last few of us that are in the pink here, illustrated in the pink, have not passed our voter-approved tax ratification election and therefore are not getting as much money into our yellow bucket. And remember in episode 4 where we talked about that yellow bucket, 82% of that feeds teacher salaries. And so because we don't have as much money in the bucket, our 82% looks less. And so again, we're talking about competing for teachers. We're talking about trying to attract people and great certified teachers to come to Crandall. They can shop the market and look around for whoever has the best or highest starting salary. Here's another illustration of our tax rate. You can see we dropped from $1.54 to $1.16 over the last few years, decreasing that by 37 cents for every $100 in property value. We have what we would be asking our voters is to increase that back by 12 cents, which would cap us at the state legally allowed limit of adding 12 cents. That would put our tax rate at $1.28, which would still be 25 cents lower than what we were back in 2018. Again, this increased tax rate would add about $6 million back into our yellow bucket, which then gives us $6 million more to raise and improve teacher salaries. This is just one of those slides that kind of illustrates the result of what's happened for not having a VADER. On the left, you'll see our starting teacher salary is significantly below everyone around us who has passed a VADER. Rockwall hasn't passed their VADER, but their tax base looks a little different than ours. So even without the VADER, they're able to beat our starting teacher pay. But not only does this affect new teachers looking at our district, it also affects our current teachers. When a teacher is about ready or getting close to retirement, the way our retirement system funds is on the average of your best 5 years. So if a teacher knows that I can make more money in another district by just simply moving, they often do. We retain some really great teachers who are fully committed to Crandall ISD, and I'm very grateful that every teacher who chooses to be in Crandall wants to be here. But it's my intent to treat our people, and my hope that we can treat our people the best of any district in the state, and we need our voter-approved tax ratification to be able to make a real difference. So while I can't speak fully for the board, I do anticipate that in the month of November, you could possibly see another voter-approved tax ratification election on the ballot. And what we were asking is an additional 12 cents to our yellow bucket. So we just got in home values not too long ago. At the very end of April, we received new tax values for our property in Crandall, and the average home value in Crandall is $315,000. That's how much it's valued, but that's not how much you're taxed because of your homestead exemption and some other things that happen. So the average taxable value in Crandall is $2,946 for an average home. That 12-cent increase would equal $20.40 a month for our people to be able to add about $6 million into our operating budget, which would then allow us the opportunity to increase teacher salaries. This series has been a lot. There's been a lot of information. So I want to just point you back to Let's Connect. Sometimes it's hard to get these videos out in a one-way method where you can't really ask the questions, but we do have Let's Connect that allows you to send emails directly to the district to get your questions answered. So of course, if you have any questions about any of our Did You Know series, we would encourage you to reach back out. I'm going to close with this slide because I'm sure that after you've watched all 5 of these episodes, your brain feels a little bit like mush, or maybe as I have been lovingly referred to, my brain on drugs, like that 1980s commercial. There's a lot that happens in schools around our finances, and again, our intent to be transparent and share this information with you is super important. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions. Thank you for being with us for all 5 episodes of Did You Know?